In 1967, at the height of the Cold War, 10 nuclear-armed Minuteman missiles simultaneously went offline at Malmstrom Air Force Base. The official explanation claimed a technical glitch, but Air Force security personnel reported a glowing red object hovering over the missile silo moments before the shutdown. Former Air Force Captain Robert Salas was on duty that night. For decades, he was ordered to remain silent about what he witnessed. Now, he and other military officers are finally speaking out about this disturbing UFO encounter, raising alarming questions about our nuclear security. What if unknown craft possess the capability to neutralize our most secure weapons in an instant? Cold War nuclear strategy and Malmstrom's critical role. Imagine a scenario where America suddenly lost control of its nuclear missiles during the height of the Cold War. Not just one missile, but an entire squadron of them, simultaneously rendered useless. In 1967, this wasn't just a security concern, it was an existential threat to national survival. The world of 1967 existed in a precarious balance of terror. The Cuban Missile Crisis had occurred just 5 years earlier, bringing humanity to the brink of nuclear annihilation. The Vietnam War was escalating, with Soviet and Chinese support for North Vietnam creating proxy conflicts between superpowers. Both the United States and Soviet Union had developed hydrogen bombs with destructive capabilities thousands of times greater than the weapons used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This was the environment in which nuclear deterrence strategy evolved. The concept was straightforward but terrifying. Prevent nuclear attack by guaranteeing that any first strike would trigger an overwhelming retaliatory response. This mutually assured destruction doctrine required absolute confidence that America's nuclear arsenal would always function as intended. Any vulnerability in this system threatened the very foundation of American security policy. Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana stood as a critical pillar in this nuclear shield. Situated in the northern United States, its location provided strategic positioning for missiles targeted toward the Soviet Union. By 1967, Malmstrom controlled 150 Minuteman nuclear-armed intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, arranged in 15 flights of 10 missiles each. Each flight was managed by a launch control center buried deep underground, staffed by Air Force officers prepared to launch on presidential order. The Minuteman missile system represented America's most advanced nuclear capability. These solid-fuel rockets could be launched within minutes, fly over 8,000 miles, and deliver nuclear warheads with pinpoint accuracy. Each missile carried a warhead with approximately 1.2 megatons of explosive power, roughly 80 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The Minuteman was a key component of America's nuclear triad, the three-pronged approach to nuclear deterrence consisting of land-based ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and strategic bombers. Security at Malmstrom was as sophisticated as 1960s technology allowed. Multiple layers of physical security surrounded each missile silo, including fencing, motion detectors, and armed guards. Launch controls required simultaneous key turns from 2 officers, separated by enough distance that no single person could initiate a launch. The launch control centers communicated with missile silos through hardened cables buried underground. Security clearances for personnel were extensive, with background checks and psychological evaluations required for anyone with access to nuclear systems. The technical safeguards designed to prevent accidental launches or system failures were equally important. Engineers had created a system like a safety net spun with countless backups, multiple redundant circuits, backup power sources, and fault detection systems. If any component failed, the system would alert operators without compromising overall functionality. These redundancies ensured missiles would remain operational even under adverse conditions. A crucial feature of the Minuteman system was the deliberate isolation between individual missile silos. Each missile operated on independent circuits, with separate power supplies and control mechanisms. This isolation was specifically engineered to prevent cascading failures. If one missile experienced problems, the issues wouldn't spread to others. This compartmentalization represented a fundamental principle of nuclear command and control. Always maintain operational capability, even when facing technical challenges. The system contained so many redundancies that military planners and engineers considered simultaneous failures of multiple missiles virtually impossible without an external cause like nuclear attack. The statistical probability of 10 missiles simultaneously failing due to unrelated component issues was essentially zero, a mathematical certainty based on reliability engineering. A mass missile failure would have implications extending far beyond technical concerns. If multiple missiles suddenly went offline, Strategic Air Command would immediately suspect Soviet interference or the prelude to an attack. Defense condition levels might elevate, bomber forces could be scrambled, and the risk of unintended escalation would rise dramatically. The entire deterrence strategy depended on certainty that commands would be followed, that systems would function, that retaliation would be possible. Even more concerning, any vulnerability in American nuclear systems might tempt Soviet leadership to consider a first strike. If they believed they could neutralize portions of the U.S. arsenal before launch, the calculus of mutually assured destruction would shift. Each side constantly assessed the other's capabilities, looking for any advantage or weakness. A demonstrated vulnerability in missile readiness would represent a significant shift in the strategic balance. The military and defense contractors had conducted thousands of hours of testing on the Minuteman system. They had analyzed every conceivable failure mode and war-gamed responses to technical problems, natural disasters, and enemy attacks. Through all this analysis, one conclusion remained consistent. Barring physical destruction or electromagnetic pulse from nuclear detonation, multiple missiles would not spontaneously fail simultaneously. This makes what happened at Malmstrom Air Force Base in March 1967 all the more disturbing. The military had constructed a system that was, by all technical assessments, immune to large-scale spontaneous failure. The engineers and commanders had absolute confidence in the technical reliability of their nuclear deterrent. Multiple simultaneous failures were considered technically impossible without a sophisticated external cause. Yet the impossible happened. At this facility responsible for a significant portion of America's nuclear deterrent capability, multiple missiles suddenly and inexplicably went into no-go status almost simultaneously. Something had penetrated America's most secure defense systems and neutralized nuclear weapons that were meant to be the ultimate guarantor of national security. This represented a fundamental challenge to the military's understanding of their own systems and capabilities. If missiles could be disabled despite all the safeguards and redundancies, what other assumptions about nuclear security might be incorrect? The incident threatened to undermine the very foundation of nuclear deterrence strategy during one of the most dangerous periods of the Cold War. What actually happened on that night in 1967 would challenge everything the military thought it knew about its nuclear security. The personnel who witnessed these events would find themselves facing something that wasn't supposed to be possible. Something that couldn't be explained by any conventional understanding of the technologies involved. The night everything changed. March 16, 1967. March 16, 1967 began as just another graveyard shift at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. The Oscar Flight Launch Control Facility sat quietly in the remote plains, one of 15 launch control centers overseeing America's nuclear missile arsenal. 60 feet underground in a reinforced concrete capsule, Captain Robert Salas and Lieutenant Fred Maywald manned their post, monitoring the status of 10 Minuteman nuclear missiles scattered across the Montana landscape. The Launch Control Center hummed with the sound of air circulation systems and electronics, a constant reminder of the technology keeping America's nuclear deterrent ready. Banks of equipment with status lights, communication systems, and the launch console with its ominous keys dominated the Spartan space. Captain Salas, an Air Force Academy graduate, and Lieutenant Maywald had both passed extensive background checks and rigorous training before being entrusted with nuclear launch authority. They represented the human element in America's nuclear command structure, the officers who would execute presidential orders if the unthinkable occurred. Around 2 a.m., a call from the Oscar Flight Security Guard above ground broke the monotony. The guard reported strange lights moving erratically in the sky near the facility. Captain Salas noted the report without alarm. Unusual lights had many possible explanations. Aircraft, weather phenomena, satellites. He instructed the security team to keep him informed and return to his duties. The incident a mere ripple in the calm routine of the night. Approximately 30 minutes later, everything changed. The security phone rang again, but this time the guard was shouting, his voice tight with tension. A glowing red-orange object had appeared and was hovering directly over the facility's front gate. Other security personnel confirmed the sighting. The guard described a large, pulsating oval casting an eerie red glow over the area. It made no sound and performed maneuvers impossible for conventional aircraft. Salas felt his pulse quicken. These weren't untrained civilians reporting. These were military security specialists responsible for protecting nuclear weapons. Their training emphasized accurate observation. Now they were witnessing something inexplicable directly above one of America's most sensitive military installations. As Salas processed this disturbing information, the first alarm pierced the control center's steady hum. A missile status light on their console changed from green to red. One Minuteman missile had suddenly gone into no-go status. Salas's stomach tightened. Before he could respond, a second missile status light changed to red. The situation deteriorated with breathtaking speed. More missile status lights flipped from green to red. Alarms continued to sound as missile after missile went offline. Salas's hands moved automatically through the prescribed protocols for missile system failures, checking each subsystem, searching for the cause of the cascading shutdowns. His mouth went dry. Command post, this is Oscar Flight. We have multiple missiles down. Repeat, multiple missiles down. Lieutenant Maywald's voice remained professional, but Salas could hear the underlying strain. The command post's response reflected confusion and disbelief. Multiple simultaneous failures weren't supposed to happen. Nothing in their training had prepared them for this scenario. The office's fingers flew across their controls, running through technical checklists. Power systems, guidance components, communication links, all checked. Meanwhile, another disturbing detail emerged. Security violation indicators were lighting up at multiple missile silos. These suggested unauthorized access at the missile sites themselves, scattered across miles of Montana landscape. Deploy security teams to all affected sites immediately, Salas ordered, his voice tight. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. A strange object appears, and suddenly missiles start failing. The statistical probability of 10 independent systems failing within minutes of each other was essentially zero. Within approximately 10 minutes, all 10 missiles under Oscar Flight's control showed no-go status. An entire flight of nuclear missiles, a significant portion of America's nuclear deterrent, had been rendered inoperable in minutes. Sweat beaded on Salas's forehead despite the cool air of the bunker. This represented a potential national security crisis at the height of the Cold War. Above ground, security personnel reported the glowing object remained visible for several more minutes before rapidly accelerating upward and disappearing. Its departure coincided with the completion of the missile shutdown sequence. The timing was unmistakable. The launch officers maintained steady communication with command throughout the crisis, documenting each event. Higher headquarters mobilized maintenance and security teams to investigate, though these would take hours to reach all 10 locations. Meanwhile, Salas and Maywald attempted every procedure to bring the missiles back online. Nothing worked. The systems remained unresponsive, bypassing multiple redundant systems designed specifically to prevent such widespread failures. The connection between what security personnel observed and the simultaneous failure of nuclear weapons systems created a disturbing picture. The glowing object had appeared, hovered over a nuclear missile facility, and during its presence, 10 nuclear missiles had gone offline. When it departed, it left behind disabled weapon systems designed to remain operational under virtually any circumstances. Hours later, maintenance teams discovered the missiles could eventually be restored, but only through complete system resets. No physical damage was found. No evidence of conventional sabotage emerged. The technical cause of the failures remained elusive despite extensive investigation. The events at Oscar Flight represented something unprecedented. Apparent technology demonstration by an unknown craft that could neutralize America's most powerful weapons. Yet despite the extraordinary nature of the incident, what these military officers witnessed would soon be classified, minimized, and officially explained away. The witnesses themselves would be instructed not to discuss what they had seen. The witnesses speak first-hand accounts of the incident. When examining UFO cases, the credibility of witnesses forms the bedrock of any serious investigation. Unlike many UFO reports that come from random civilians with no specialized training, the Malmstrom incident stands apart precisely because of who the witnesses were: military professionals with extensive training, security clearances, and careers they were putting at risk by coming forward. Captain Robert Salas, a graduate of the Air Force Academy with years of service, had undergone rigorous training before being entrusted with nuclear launch authority. His background included engineering studies, specialized missile operations training, and extensive background checks for his security clearance. Lieutenant Fred Maywald, the commanding officer on duty with Salas that night, possessed similar qualifications and technical expertise with the Minuteman missile system. Both men represented the type of witnesses whose testimony would normally be considered beyond reproach in any context other than UFO encounters. During the incident on March 16, 1967, Salas was stationed 6 stories underground in the Oscar Flight Launch Control Center. He didn't personally see the UFO that hovered above the facility. His experience came through phone calls from security personnel and the alarming cascade of system failures on his control console. "I received a call from a guard on the surface," Salas later reported. He reported seeing strange lights in the sky making odd maneuvers, which were not airplanes. The second call revealed more detail. A red-orange, pulsating, oval-shaped object hovering over the facility. As the missiles began failing one after another, Salas followed protocol exactly, documenting each failure and reporting up the chain of command. His training took over as he systematically checked for possible explanations, even as the unprecedented nature of the situation became clear. His detailed technical knowledge allowed him to understand precisely how the missile systems worked, what could cause failures, and the significance of multiple simultaneous shutdowns. Maywald's testimony corroborates that 10 missiles went off alert simultaneously, an occurrence that missile technicians and engineers had repeatedly stated was virtually impossible without an external cause. The missiles had been deliberately designed with separate systems to prevent this kind of cascading failure. His account matches Salas's in every technical detail, from the timing of the failures to the inability to bring the systems back online through standard procedures. While Salas and Maywald monitored the crisis from underground, security personnel above ground had direct visual contact with whatever was causing it. These weren't ordinary guards, but Air Force security police specifically trained to protect nuclear weapons, with training in accurate observation, threat assessment, and response protocols. Multiple guards observed the glowing, red-orange object hovering near the facility's front gate. Despite observing from different positions around the facility, they reported consistent details. The oval-shaped object pulsated, maintained position over sensitive areas, and eventually departed with extraordinary speed that no aircraft of the era could match. After the incident, witnesses were separated and questioned independently as part of the Air Force investigation. Their accounts aligned on key details: the timing of events, the appearance of the object, and the simultaneous failure of multiple missile systems. This consistency, despite independent questioning, is a standard marker investigators use to assess witness credibility. The professional stakes for these witnesses were enormous. Years later, Salas would reflect on the personal cost. "When I first started speaking about this publicly, former colleagues stopped calling. Some friends questioned my judgment. My aerospace career opportunities narrowed, but I couldn't stay silent about something that had such profound implications for national security." Military personnel reporting UFO encounters around sensitive nuclear installations face potential career damage, ridicule from colleagues, and, in some cases, explicit orders to remain silent. This professional risk makes their testimony more credible, not less. What motivation would career military officers have to fabricate an encounter that could only damage their standing? They had everything to lose and nothing tangible to gain by reporting something so far outside accepted reality. In the years following the incident, Captain Salas continued his military career, eventually retiring honorably from the Air Force. He went on to work in the aerospace industry before becoming an advocate for disclosure about UFO encounters at nuclear facilities. His persistence in bringing attention to the Malmstrom incident, despite institutional resistance, underscores his belief in its significance. Salas has maintained his account across multiple interviews, books, and congressional testimonies spanning decades. The testimony from Oscar flight personnel aligns with reports from Echo Flight, where a similar incident had occurred days earlier. This cross-correlation between separate launch facilities, with different personnel reporting similar phenomena and effects, strengthens the case that something truly anomalous occurred at Malmstrom in March 1967. These were military professionals specifically chosen for their reliability, technical knowledge, and mental stability. They had passed psychological screenings and held clearances that verified their trustworthiness. In any other military context, their observations would be treated as definitive evidence. Only the extraordinary nature of what they reported caused their testimony to be questioned or dismissed. As the Air Force worked to contain the situation in the hours and days following the incident, these witnesses would find themselves facing an institutional response designed to minimize and explain away their experiences. Despite detailed first-hand accounts from multiple credible observers, The official explanation would diverge dramatically from what the witnesses themselves had experienced and reported. The question remained, why would the military go to such lengths to create alternative explanations for something these reliable observers had so clearly documented? The official explanation versus reality. The immediate aftermath of the Oscar flight incident triggered a rapid military response. Within hours of the missile shutdown, Strategic Air Command Headquarters was fully informed of the situation. The unauthorized disabling of nuclear weapons represented a potential national security crisis requiring swift investigation. Maintenance teams received emergency deployment orders and began arriving at the affected missile silos by dawn. These technical response teams included specialists in every aspect of the Minuteman missile system, electronic systems experts, propulsion technicians, guidance system specialists, and security personnel. Their mission was twofold: restore the missiles to operational status as quickly as possible, and determine exactly what had caused the unprecedented simultaneous failure. America's nuclear deterrent had been compromised, and military leadership demanded answers. The maintenance teams worked methodically, examining each missile site independently. They ran comprehensive diagnostic tests on every subsystem, guidance components, power supplies, communication links, and launch sequencers. They inspected physical components for signs of tampering or damage. They verified security logs and checked for any evidence of intrusion. This exhaustive technical investigation continued for several days as they sought to identify the cause of the failures. What these teams discovered would directly contradict the explanation that would eventually become the official Air Force position. The technicians found no common point of failure across the 10 missiles. Each missile had gone offline, but detailed examination revealed no consistent pattern of component failure that could explain the simultaneous shutdown. The missiles had different manufacturing dates, maintenance histories, and component sets. There was no technical thread connecting their failures. Despite this lack of physical evidence, the Air Force formulated an official explanation: an electronic component failure had somehow caused the shutdown. This explanation appeared in internal reports and became the authorized response to any inquiries about the incident. The technical details remained deliberately vague, referring to an unspecified electronic signal generator that had malfunctioned and somehow affected all 10 missiles simultaneously. This explanation faced immediate skepticism from the technicians and engineers who actually worked on the missile systems. The Minuteman was specifically designed with redundant, isolated circuits to prevent cascading failure. Each missile operated as an independent system with multiple safeguards. The guidance systems, power supplies, and communication networks were deliberately separated to ensure that a failure in one missile would not affect others. Robert Hastings, a researcher who interviewed numerous missile technicians who worked at Malmstrom, found consistent rejection of the official explanation among technical personnel. One former missile maintenance officer told Hastings directly, "Those systems were designed so that one failure couldn't take down multiple missiles. We're talking about independent systems that shouldn't have failed simultaneously without an external cause." Dr. Robert Jacobs, a former Air Force officer who worked with missile systems, has stated, "These systems had backup systems that had backup systems." The statistical probability of 10 missiles failing simultaneously due to component failure is essentially zero. It would be like flipping a coin and getting heads 100 times in a row.